Hey, so Lorwyn Eclipsed has finally been revealed. Let's talk about it. The name of the new Lorwyn set coming out early next year is Lorwyn Eclipsed. We've only seen two pieces of art. The first one is here, where we see a Lorwyn elf. Lorwyn elves look sort of like satyrs. They have horns and like cloven feet. And then the only other artwork shows us the Aurora, or what looks to be the Aurora at least, along with like a dolmen gate over here. So at like a high level, what was going on with Lorwyn the first time around? In the original Lorwyn block, Una, Queen of the Fae, secretly sort of ruled the plane, although pretty much no one knew it. Every few centuries, Lorwyn would undergo the Aurora. The Aurora would change things from Lorwyn, which was a pastoral, perpetual midsummer, perpetual midday, like idyllic land, to Shadowmoor, which was a perpetual evening, perpetual like fall, and everything was like an inverse version of itself. But more importantly, everyone would forget what came before, except for Una. The problem being the mending happened and a new Aurora was coming early. Una was not prepared for this, so she had to create a backup plan in the form of Marilyn. The real Marilyn was a Mornsong elf that gets killed off in like the prologue, I think. Marilyn we follow throughout the story is actually a copy created by Una to be her like backup avatar consciousness in case the real Una doesn't like make it through the Aurora intact because she didn't have time to prepare for this one. Kolfanor knew about Una and everything she was up to and tried to put a plan in place to stop her because of this new Aurora. He finally saw an opportunity. This plan involved Aisling, one of the Flamekin of the plane, and Kolfanor's student Rhys, who had learned a lot of poison magic from the U. The story gets very complicated, but simply put, Marilyn learns what she is and decides to defeat Una. The Aurora hits and everything changes. Aisling becomes the destroyer, in part because of what Kolfanor did, becomes sort of the avatar of a greater destructive fire elemental. Rhys forgets everything because there's no magic to protect his mind. Kolfanor's sapling attempts to work things behind the scenes to make sure that Una loses. And their friend Brigid gets hold of a magical amulet. I think it's called like the Amulet of Morningtide. And she is the only person who does not change. On the plane, the merfolk go from sort of gentle traders and ferrymen on the rivers to these cruel cutthroats. The goblins, the boggarts, go from sort of playful, mischievous, sometimes cruel, to vicious, angry creatures. The Flamekin become cinders, in part because of Aisling's whole deal. It's not worth getting into all of it because, like a lot of early Magic story, it's really one novel's worth of plot stretched over 3 different novels. So there's a lot of complicated stuff that you don't need to know. The elves were unique in that they went from sort of these xenophobic, we're beautiful and better than everyone else, to the protectors of beauty and the light, and generally like the heroes. They went from like the villains of the setting in Lorwyn to the heroes of the setting in Shadowmoor. Also giants and fairies and other things, but I'm not going to get into all that. These are like the biggest changes. Marilyn starts to become more and more like Una in her quest to depose Una, until finally she reverses course, and with Rhys and Aisling's and Brigid's help, she's able to defeat Una. They think they've killed Una, but at the very end it's sort of implied she's still around. Rhys stays with Marilyn and vows to kill her if he sees her turning into Una. And the natural cycle returns, although it doesn't explain what that means. And given that we see the Aurora again, clearly something's still going on with it. I should also note that whole story takes place about 40 years ago, which we know because of Nissa Ravain's origin story from Magic Origins, where she appears on Lorwyn just in time for the Great Aurora. Thematically, Lorwyn is very inspired by Irish or Celtic folklore. This gives it a lot of overlap with Eldraine, but it doesn't have the whole King Arthur thing going on, and in fact, it doesn't have humans at all. The last time we saw Lorwyn was during March of the Machines, where we saw Gilt-Leaf Elves fighting against the Phyrexians, and a lot of them being completed because, perfection. But interestingly, we also saw a Shadowmoor Kithkin. What does that mean? We'll have to wait to January to find out.